that you give part of your valuable time to me.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of yours and follow almost everything what you do. And I want to start the interview with a huge thank you, what you have done to humankind and to the planet and for me.
Okay.
You have been my eye-opener, especially on the reptile topic. And I'm very grateful for what you're doing and all the risks you take. And
Okay.
I'm really admiring you.
Well, thank you very much.
And since you started with Biggest Secret 98, here in Sweden, your translator and others said, "Oh, he has gone mad." I said, "Oh, well, let me read the book." I wrote the book. It was the usual David Icke, only new information. I couldn't judge whether the reptiles are there or not. I've never heard about it. But I started to make my own research from
Okay.
that day. And I found evidence on evidence that you are right. And therefore, one of my main themes when I talk to people and try to eye-open is be aware there are others here on that planet, not only humans, and they are in charge. And they are reptiles, there are different races, white dragons and so on. And if you wouldn't mind, I would like to have the emphasis in this interview on your research on the reptiles and what was your eye-openers and the most open evidence that you can transport to others that they perhaps get their eyes open.
Well, what I've done over the years is let information accumulate. So if someone comes along and says reptiles run the world, I say, okay, well, a bit more. So what are you saying? And I won't then say, hey, reptiles run the world. I'll just leave it and see where it goes, and see where it goes, and see where it goes. And my life since I had my big awakening in 1990 and 91 has been extraordinarily synchronistic in terms of the way the information's come to me. In the early days, early years, the information was all names, dates, places, government conspiracies, banking conspiracies, the web of control in the world of the scene and secret societies and what have you. And then from about mid-90s, I was in the United States talking, in those days, to next to nobody. But over a period of about, I don't know, 15 days, I met something like 12 different people, and I was going to a different city every day, who told me basically the same story, that in theme, obviously the detail was different, of how they'd seen people look human, change into a reptile figure, and then change back again. Some of them had had this experience in the course of their everyday life. Some had had the experience meeting people like within the Jehovah's Witnesses and other such organizations in Salt Lake City and in New York. And others had been involved in mind control, government mind control projects, and had experienced it on the inside. And it started to build. And then eventually I met in South Africa a man called Credo Mutwa, who's now well into his 90s, Credo. And he is a Zulu shaman and the official historian of the Zulu nation. And he started talking to me about what he called the Chitahuri, which were in Zulu legend, Zulu lore, a reptilian race that is manipulating human society. And then you then start looking in other parts of the world. You look at the Mayans and the whole reptilian theme of history and ancient cultures. And then as it builds up and builds up and builds up, then you start meeting if you like, insiders in the modern structure who are telling you the same thing. And by this time, the whole wealth of information has got to the point, and it's so multifaceted, that you cross that line where you say, actually, this is going on. And it's like everything, you know. People talk about mind control. I call it perception control, same thing. But perception is a milder word than mind control. Mind control, people think Manchurian candidates and stuff like that. Perceptual control is the way, and in the end the only way, that a few people can control billions, by getting them to see the world in the way that suits the few and the agenda of the few. And of course, if you want to hide the real point of control, what's really behind the global web of manipulation, then you need your target population in a perceptual state that cannot conceive of such a thing. So it's extraordinary that we live in a reality in which our visual frequency band is so tiny, visible light, it's laughable. It's a joke how little of reality we can see.
Yes.
We live on a planet, I would say actually it's more than that, but on a planet, which according to mainstream science and their projection of the size of the universe currently, the Earth is the equivalent of 1/1,000,000th of a pinhead. So that's the nature of what we're experiencing. And yet, the perceptual control is so powerful that to speak of other forms of life that are not human, that take an intelligent form, that operate outside the frequency band of human sight, is to be, by reflex action, in the case of so many people, to be called mad and crazy and ridiculous. And of course, that is a wonderful perceptual firewall against people encompassing the fact that the world is not just a little bit not like they thought it was, it's nothing like they thought it was. And this perceptual prison, what I call the postage stamp consensus, this narrow band of sense of the possible, is so tiny, and it goes from cradle to grave through the education system and peer pressure and media, all within this tiny band of perceptual possibility, that what is happening in the world, compared with what people perceive as possible, is so vastly, vastly different that cannot make the leap to encompass even the possibility of what is really going on. And so when I started out with this and started writing about it in the late 1990s, I knew what the reaction would be. I knew they'd say you're crazy, you're mad, he's all this stuff. Because if you look through what we call history, anyone, almost in any subject area, that has gone beyond the norm, gone beyond the postage stamp, has had dismissal, ridicule, or whatever. So that's part of the course. But my philosophy is this: if what you say has validity, and you keep talking about it, and and don't stop because of the reaction, then if it has validity, eventually it will be shown to be so. And what has encouraged me greatly is how I'm seeing today, both in numbers and the kind of people who would have gone like that a few years ago to this, are now looking at it in a new light. And there was a man came out about the last year, 18 months, he wrote a book and has done done more than a few interviews in the alternative media, called William Tompkins, who claims to have worked in a, quote, think tank based in San Diego at the naval base. And I know from my own research, going back to the 90s, that one of the most significant parts of the American intelligence community is naval intelligence. And so much goes on there, not least in relation to extraterrestrial, non-human interaction with the world, that what he said about that made sense to me. And he does produce other documentation. But what he's saying is, from his insider knowledge, a reptilian race controls world governments, and its command center, as he calls it, is the moon, which of course made my ears prick up, because I've been talking about the moon and its effect on human behavior and human perception for quite a few years now. So we are now reaching the point where far greater numbers than ever before are starting to look at these apparently far out concepts and seeing that maybe they're worth looking at a bit more deeper than saying he's mad and walking away.
Yes. So my research showed me that there is a devil. The devil is a positive being. Because he loves God, he took the role of the negative to test. And then he has an own world, and this world is always hierarchy, because nobody wants to stay by its own will. And he has to use mind control, and he has to have pyramid structures. Only the top of the pyramid is controlled, and then the rest is controlled. My research shows me that the reptilians, even the highest ones, the Draco, the white Draco reptilians, are under mind control themselves from the Archons. And Archons is artificial intelligence, a kind of virus for the whole universe. Do you know what is between the Archons and the devil?
Well, I mean, we all look at things in our own way, and we have our different symbols and we have different names. You know, in my books, like the last one, Phantom Self, and in the talks I'm doing on this world tour, my concept of what you call the Archons and what the Gnostic people left us in their texts is that what they call the Lord Archon or Demiurge is basically a very distorted, inverted state of awareness. Because we get so addicted to the world of form, because that's all we see, that our perceptions often can only perceive life, consciousness, awareness from the perspective of some kind of form. Does it have a head, two legs, 2 arms, and a torso? But where I'm coming from with, and the Gnostics talked about the fact that in their base form, these archons were energetic. For me, what we are looking at is a state of awareness, a very inverted, distorted state of awareness. And this awareness is seeking to assimilate other life within itself. In other words, if you take this, what I'll call archontic awareness, to be a computer virus, it wants to infect all the computers. So the computers start responding, perceiving, and therefore behaving in ways that align with its state of inversion and its state of distortion. And so when I look at what we call reptilians and greys and all these other expressions of form outside of the human, I see them as being assimilated into this inverted awareness. So you can see a reptilian form, you can see this form, you can see that form, you can see a human form. But what's calling the shots, what's driving the perception, what's driving behavior is this sense of awareness, this distorted sense of awareness. And if you look at how the Gnostics basically describe these archons, it breaks down very powerfully to what is known as the hair test of psychopathic traits. First of all, no empathy, parasitical nature, pathological liars, willing to do whatever they need to do to get what they want. I mean, you break down the traits of a psychopath, and you're basically describing these entities. And what I would say is what you're actually describing is this state of awareness that has assimilated these entities. And I go into this in the last book in great length, and also in the talks, because this archontic form of what we would call artificial intelligence, AI. I don't call AI artificial intelligence. I call it archontic intelligence, because that's what I suggest it is. What's been happening is, and not least through reptilian and grey and manipulation. In other words, manipulation through those forms of this awareness. Humanity has been manipulated along a road where we have developed intellectually to the point where we can technologically build our own prison, but not spiritually enough. In other words, not expanded awareness beyond the program enough to see that that's what we're doing. And what I'm saying is that what we're seeing now being built all around us in the technologically connected world of smart technology and the Internet of Things, where everything's connected to the Internet, a structure is being built to allow this archontic or artificial intelligence to take the world over completely. No middlemen or women necessary anymore, because if you follow the story of what's going on, and what even CIA people like David Petraeus, when he was head of the CIA for a short time, was talking about with the Internet of Things, is the plan is that everything is connected to the Internet. Now you go into Silicon Valley and you go into the Ray Kurzweils of this world, this Google executive, who's openly saying that by 2030 that the human mind, the human brain, will be connected to what he calls the cloud. What is the cloud? It's a technological sub-reality, the one I've been writing about all these years. And this technological sub-reality, which he calls the cloud, is being designed to be controlled by artificial intelligence. Now, the point I've been making is all the time now, we are hearing artificial intelligence will control this, artificial intelligence will control that. But where is the big question? What is artificial intelligence? What is this intelligence that's going to be not only controlling the Internet and everything connected to it? They're now building a gathering world army of military technology, which is controlled by AI. And then you've got this whole nanotechnology level of what they're calling smart dust, where you can breathe the stuff in and you suddenly become connected because you've got this nano technology inside you communicating with other technology, so you become part of the grid. Now you're connected to the frickin' Internet, along with the fridge and the heating and the car, the driverless car, and all the rest of it. So then, and Kurzweil's openly talking about this, then, as he's saying, once people get connected to this artificial intelligence, this cloud, gradually after that, the cloud, AI, will do more and more of their thinking until there's no human thinking left. He's openly saying this now. Why? Because the sales pitch is will become superhuman. The reality is will become subhuman, non-human. And if you look, I call Silicon Valley the devil's playground. I guess because that's where it's coming out of. It's a combination of Silicon Valley and DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, that are working very closely together. And you can even show this in career moves. You've got this lady Regina Duggan, who was director of DARPA, that comes up with more and more sophisticated ways of killing ever more people, like death rays and stuff like that. A DARPA that actually claims on its own website that it was responsible for the internet being the backbone of this technological control system. And suddenly Regina Duggan makes, on the face of it, a very strange career move. She goes and becomes an executive of Google, where Ray Kurzweil is, of course, and all this. And then last summer, the summer of 2016, she moves and becomes an executive of Facebook, which is another organization in this internet Silicon Valley web that is all part of this creation of this technological sub-reality to be controlled by AI. And what Kurzweil is saying in selling this superhuman stuff is now being supported more and more by other major players in Silicon Valley, not least this guy Elon Musk, who was a co-founder of PayPal and puts rockets up into the sky, taking satellites to beam Wi-Fi everywhere. That's all part of this. Elon Musk has a very strange way of selling the same thing that Kurzweil's saying. He's saying, well, yeah, he says, this AI, it's very dangerous. I mean, it's very dangerous for humanity. But if we're not going to be assimilated by robots, then what we've got to do is get connected to AI so that we can keep up with them. So, I mean, it's like good cop, bad cop, Kurzweil, Musk. And, of course, Elon Musk has come out in the last few weeks and talked about the fact that he's developing this, quote, neural link between the human brain and technology. And you're seeing it unfold all around you. But you need eyes to see. And then it's an open book. If your perception is caught in the postage stamp, then you won't see it. Everything will be just a blur of things happening with no connections. What's happening in terms of preparing people for it and pulling people along this road is that there's a very clear stepping stone going on. First of all, you get people addicted to holdables. Well, I mean, that's not achieved, is it? Hello? Sorry, I'm on the phone. Yeah. And then you move them on to wearables. Now you're on the skin. You want to get in the body. Now you're on the skin, so that you're closer. These are your Google Watch, your Apple Watches, your Google Glass, and Bluetooth, all this stuff. And then you move them where you really wanted to go all along, and that's implantables, and that's now happening. You know, I mean, I wrote a book in the mid-90s called "And the Truth Shall Set You Free," in which I quoted a guy who said he'd been to meetings, including people like Kissinger, where they were, even back then, because they don't make this up.
Aaron Russo?
No, it was further back than that. He was a guy that worked in technology, and he was saying that at these meetings, the plan was discussed of how they were going to sell microchips to people. And one of the ways, two of the ways, so one of the ways I'll talk about first, was that they were going to say to parents, if you microchip your children, you'll always know where they are, you'll never lose your child again.
Prince of England.
That is being used virtually word for word in American states now. to persuade parents to microchip the children. And another way was starting the stepping stone by microchipping people who were suffering from dementia, so you'd always know where they were. Of course, once you get it, and it's like, of course, the first step in this really was microchipping domestic animals. First of all, this is the process. Watch for this, people. The first process is, oh no, it's only voluntary. Oh no, but it's very good, very good. You always know where your dog is. Yeah, great. And then a bit further down the road, actually it's now compulsory. And this is what they want to do with microchips. And just as they've made it virtually impossible, certainly in an urban situation, to function without credit cards these days, so the idea is to make it almost possible to function without the microchip. And the thing about microchips is, you know, we talk about these chips under the skin, which are like, you know, the size of a grain of rice. But in many ways that's a diversion. I mean, you know, to pull you in there. Oh yeah. So you don't see the smart dust, the neural dust as they call it as well. And there was a movie a few years ago called Transcendence, starring Johnny Depp, which was actually putting it in your face. This was a movie where Johnny Depp played a scientist a little bit into the future, by which time the Internet of Things was a reality, who had a quantum computer well beyond the computers that we see now. And he found he was dying, so he and his scientist wife downloaded his consciousness onto the quantum computer, and after he died, they downloaded it onto the internet. And Johnny Depp's mind became the internet, the mind of the internet. I mean, of course, there's many scientists around the world who are saying, now, could the internet wake up? I think it already has, personally. But anyway, what happened then is, because the Internet of Things was a reality by then in this movie, his mind controlled everything connected to the internet. So then the question was, how do we get humans connected to the internet so the Johnny Depp mind can control them? And what they did is they spread, quote, sentient nano probes, nanobots, on the wind.
Chemtrails?
On the wind. Chemtrails, exactly. That chemtrails is we've looked at the content of chemtrails from the point of view of aluminium, from the point of view of barium, and all these other things. But for me, what the key thing that's coming down is nanotechnology.
For me too.
And then you take again Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil has openly said that everything, all of nature, trees, you know, everything, and everything in cities, but the whole of nature, he says, is going to be infused with nanotechnology, smart dust. So, as he says, they will all become intelligent. Well, on a level of consciousness, they're already intelligent, but he's missed that one. Now, that obviously comes to a question. Well, how are they going to do that? Well, how are you going to bathe the entirety of nature with nanotechnology, except from the sky? This is what is happening. And of course, if you want a cloud which everyone is attached to, then that cloud must be everywhere. Nowhere at all excluded. And so what we're seeing is satellites going up on an extraordinary scale, people don't realize, to bathe the entire planet with Wi-Fi. And appropriately, last year, there was a rocket exploded at Cape Canaveral, which was an Elon Musk rocket from his SpaceX organization. And it was about to take a Facebook. You know Facebook, so just social media. That's all it is. Oh, I'm just going to the toilet. I'll be back in a minute. All that. That's all it. No, it's not. Facebook and Google and DARPA and all these other organizations, SpaceX, they're all connected. And it was about to take up a Facebook satellite to bathe vast swathes of sub-Saharan Africa with Wi-Fi. And to give people an idea of the scale we're talking about, not that long ago, only a few months ago, an Indian satellite broke the record, or an Indian rocket rather, broke the record for the number of satellites taken up in one launch. 104. 104 satellites on one rocket. And so when you look at the entirety of it, how many satellites are going up? What we're looking at, I've been writing about this for years and years and years, that it was coming. We're looking at the creation of a technological sub-reality beamed at the Earth within the level that we interact with. And it is a massive assimilation of the human mind to control every thought, every perception, every feeling, every emotion. And I saw a presentation by a former DARPA operative, where he was trying the best he could and struggling to put it in positive terms. But he was describing quite openly the fact that they were developing a hive mind, a hive human mind. Again, you know, they're selling it in positive terms. Oh, you know, you connect all minds, you've got one gigantic mind, think what we can do. But that's not what it's for. It's for creating one connected hive mind with one point of perception, which everyone
and
will get.
Controller.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that it's more helpful now. Ironically, the closer we get to this technologically, the more the technology itself is becoming known by people, and people are becoming familiar with it, which gives you the analogies, if you like, to explain things which people can follow, because you're talking basically about something they're becoming more and more used to. You know, if you were a shaman back in 100, 200, 300 years ago or more, how do you start talking about this whole manipulation with only the tools and words and analogies of that society? You where do you start? You've got to use massively wide analogies that are way off the mark, but as close as you can get. And then, you know, the anthropologists and the historians go along to these ancient cultures and what have you, and they take what the shamans say literally and say, oh, they're all mad, they think this. No, it's symbolic. What we have the advantage of now is that what we're talking about is when you're talking about these technological things, and artificial intelligence, you're not any longer even using analogies. They're basically real. You're basically talking literally with all this. And so what we've got is this gathering creation of a vehicle for artificial intelligence to control everything. And that artificial intelligence, ultimately, through other forms like reptilian and others, has been manipulating human society along this road all along.
Do you have a clue who constructed the Archons or AI?
No, I mean, what the Gnostics talk about is the fact that it was an error. It happened by a kind of mistake, as they saw it, that it was a creation which went awry and then became a force in itself, but a force that was artificial in the sense that it wasn't an expression of the great awareness, what I call infinite awareness. It kind of, what's coming into my mind as I'm speaking is The Sorcerer's Apprentice, the Disney film. You know, where the buckets and the brushes just kept increasing and increasing and replicating until that you know, it was all completely uncontrollable, because that was the Sorcerer's Apprentice, played by Mickey Mouse as I recall it, was trying to do an experiment when the sorcerer was out, and it went totally wrong. And so and what he created kept replicating itself until there was just absolute uncontrollable chaos. And that's, you know, in the widest possible analogy, that's kind of what they seem to be talking about and describing.
I heard that positive non-human entities are now coming to the world to help us because they most fear AI. They say we must stop it here, otherwise it's spreading more over. Have you heard something about that?
Well, let's say I hope it's bloody true. Well, we are in trouble. Yes, I do think that. See, long ago in 1990, when I had my kind of awakening, and in those early days, I met quite a few psychic people. I went to one by choice because I felt this presence around me for about a year. I wanted to see if she'd pick it up and give me any clue what was going on. That was the one I chose to go to. But after that, I met many others synchronistically. I mean, everyone I seemed to meet was a psychic for about 6 months, and then it just disappeared. But in those early months, there were many themes that I was being told through these people, and one of them was that there was a kind of a vibrational frequency change coming that was going to wake people up from their slumber, their coma. That people who were most awake, what we would say today less programmed, would be affected first, and then even those really programmed at that time would start to be affected. And the other expression of this was that all that had been hidden will be brought to the surface. And of course, in 1990, there was no evidence for that whatsoever. But look at it now. You know, as I go around the world on this speaking tour since June last year, I've never seen anything like it, both in numbers and also in the kind of people that are coming, the kind of people that stop you in the street. I mean, you know, in the last, nearly 30 years, 27 years I've been on this road now, doing this. It's gone from being laughed at wherever I went in Britain. Literally couldn't go into a bar without there being just uproar and laughter and ridicule, to people literally all over the world stopping me in the street, recognizing me because they're into the information. Now, you know, something is happening. There is an awakening going on, and what I'm seeing is this. It's a fork in the road that's becoming more and more blatant and more extreme, in the sense that the numbers that are awakening to beyond the program and seeing the world differently is growing and growing and growing. But those who are not are going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the program. It's you know, there was a point where you just started to see it, that kind of stuff, but now it's like blatant. So I gave the name to this vibrational change, the truth vibrations, the first name of the first
waves.
book. Yeah, which is, I gave it the name truth vibrations because of this thing I was told about all that had been hidden being brought to the surface. So, you know, there is something happening to challenge this challenge this distortion. And you know, what we need, I think, is an explosion of empathy. Because I look around the world and I see empathy being systematically deleted. And once you delete empathy, you are then into the major trait of psychopathic behavior.
Devilish behavior.
You know, when I see kids on computer games, violent computer games, where they are being exposed to empathy-deleted behavior. Oh, kill, oh, I've got him, kill. Over and over, cumulatively. It's actually deleting empathy. Mm-hmm. And without empathy, then there is no fail-safe mechanism of human behavior. And so for me, we need an explosion, an outbreak of mass empathy with each other. The ability to put ourselves in the feelings of others. And that only really comes when you can expand your awareness, you can expand your self-identity, you can expand your perception of reality beyond the program. Because once you're in that narrow band of programming or perception, everything seems apart from everything else. When you expand your awareness, you start to see that everything's connected to everything else. And the way that we live our lives and perceive things completely transforms once you start to realize the true nature of reality, i.e. we're all one consciousness experiencing itself. Instead of, I am this person with this name, in this body, with this color, and this religion, and this country, which tends to pull people apart. And, it's like, what I've been saying over the years is that part of this hijack of human perception has been to move our point of interaction with reality and each other from the heart to the head. And the head should serve the heart, not be a dictator of it or close it down. And of course, this is where empathy comes from. I mean, you feel it. I mean, you feel it when you're feeling empathy. This is where you feel it. Oh my God, that's terrible. You don't say, "Oh my God, that's terrible." Oh, God, that's terrible.
You can't put mind control on the heart, but only on the brain.
Yeah. So, and I think that's because of the frequency band that they can operate in. So, if you can get people in their head, the head, especially the left side of the brain, just sees everything as apart from everything else. So you have survival of the fittest, dog eat dog, every man and woman for themselves. Whereas this would never see love like that. Interestingly, in the Gnostic writings that were found at Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945, the writings that actually have given us a big fix on their way of seeing reality, they describe how this archontic force infused into the human form what they call the counterfeit spirit. And they go on to say that this counterfeit spirit hardened the hearts of the people. Mm-hmm. And what I would say is that this counterfeit spirit is actually a form of AI. It's the archontic force, and it's when I look at terms like being born with original sin and all this stuff, I think it could well actually be describing this counterfeit spirit. And when you look at human behavior, and you look at human behavior through a long period. And you look even at the religions and what have you, there is this common theme of these two forces pulling against each other. One is the heart, I would say, and one is this archontic awareness, or lack of it, this inversion. And when people get pulled into hatred and violence and conflict and selfishness and all these traits that unravel the harmony of human society, I say that they are reacting to this counterfeit spirit. And when they can come to the heart and they see things as, and they want things in harmony and compassion and empathy and all this, I say that's the true nature of human. And the true nature of the human, i.e. the true nature of consciousness, having an experience as a human, is overwhelmed by, often, by this counterfeit spirit and its traits. Now, everything in this reality is a frequency. And so the counterfeit spirit is a frequency band. The heart is a frequency band. If you go deep into consciousness, you go beyond the realms of frequency eventually, but it's a frequency. Now, if you can put people into low vibrational, as I call them, mental and emotional states, which are themselves frequencies, if you can pull people into mental and emotional states that are within the frequency band of this counterfeit spirit, then that you're locking them into it. You're increasing the power by which this counterfeit spirit impacts upon their behavior, their responses, their reactions, everything. And you know, when you look at things like the behavior of ISIS, I would say the behavior of the Saudi Arabia royal family, who have funded ISIS, and the reason that ISIS act like the Saudi Arabian royal family is because one created the other, and the Saudi royal family created ISIS on behalf of the West, not least America and Britain primarily. But the
Mossad and CIA also.
Yeah. So, but the point being that when you look at the behavior of ISIS and what they do to people, how they treat people, that is classic archontic psychopathy.
Some say a lot of reptilian souls reincarnated, which before had been in the Soviet Union making the revolution and all the cruelties in the communist part of the Russian time.
Well, I think if you see, you know, you can look at it and you can say, look how bad the Soviet Union was, and then you look at what America has done to the Middle East and what America has done to many parts of the world. You look at what Britain has done, my goodness.
Yes.
You look what Pol Pot did. You look what Hitler did. You look what Stalin did. You can pick these expressions of this extreme state of counterfeit spirit all over the world, but the common denominator between them is not communist or fascist or whatever label we give to it. It's the counterfeit spirit expressing itself. You know, I mean, you look at what Hitler did, oh, that's fascism. You look at what Stalin did, oh, that's communism. Excuse me, it's just an expression of the same state of being, mate. You're just giving it a different label. I see this. I see on the news when I look at people, you know, in these situations of conflict and horror and violence, and you can see it. You can see it in their eyes. There is a look in their eyes that you see. It's a common thing. Often a deadness, because basically they're vehicles of this spirit. They're not expressing their own awareness. They're basically computer terminals on the internet of this counterfeit spirit, which is a very appropriate analogy, given this counterfeit spirit ultimately is what we would call artificial intelligence. So this is the other thing. People conceive that the biological is natural and the technological is technological. The force that's behind all this, including the reptilian expression of it, they see the biological as technological. The biological to them is technological.
So it is.
So therefore, creating a vehicle, a biological vehicle for this archontic awareness has already been done. But there's still the, if you like, the true human that's there to push against this full-blown archontic perceptual control, to push against it. This is why people, they, you know, like I say, through history, you've had this feeling of Satan, get behind me, and all this stuff that people say. What they want to do with the transhumanist agenda is to so connect the human mind to this AI technological sub-reality that human awareness, that human consciousness, that human state is shut out altogether. Doesn't mean that it won't exist in some form, but not in a form that can impact upon perception.
They want to cancel the contact to God.
Yeah, because they want, well, I call God infinite awareness, but just a different way of seeing it. But the whole process of human control is focusing attention overwhelmingly in the five senses at the exclusion of expanded awareness that will be able to see the forest, whereas the five senses can only see the twigs. And the reason you know, humanity has been so easy to bring along this road to develop intellectually so we can build our own prison, but not spiritually so we can see that's what we're doing, is because the intellect is obsessed with the twigs. And
they cut 10 of our 12 DNA strings.
Yeah, many people believe that. It does absolutely make sense. But the fact that there's a great quote from Nikola Tesla. He's talking about science, mainstream science. And he said that science thinks deeply, but it doesn't think clearly. And he said you can think deeply and be quite insane, but you can't think clearly and be insane. And so when you look at the intellect, it is able to think deeply about the twigs, seeing everything as a part, the dots. But it can't think, therefore see clearly how the dots connect. And so you can pull people along this road and they'll build their prison, and anyone that's going along this road is going, look at it, it's so obvious. Don't be mad, don't be crazy, you're insane, and all that stuff. And this is how it's been done. It's really simple, really, what's gone on. And so this unity between the intellect and consciousness beyond the intellect is their worst nightmare. Because once that happens, it's like the veil lifts and you can see it.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree that humankind, since 2012, changed from a negative to a positive timeline?
I don't know. All I can say is that I've seen a gradually emerging momentum from nearly 30 years ago when I started out, when, oh dear, virtually no one wanted to know. No one was interested. I mean, I went around America for 3 months, and I was talking to 8 people here, 20 people there, someone's front room, 3 or 4 people. And now I look at what's going on today. There is a momentum of awakening going on, there's no question about it. So something's happening. And we've just got to go with it, really. But not just go with it, again, intellectually, but live it. Not stand on one side of the street saying, oh, I knew that was coming, I told you, Ethel, I told you that would come in, didn't I? And you know what they're going to do next? They're going to do this. Go beyond that. Cross the frickin' street and engage with it. Stop cooperating with your own enslavement. Stop being intimidated into silence because people around you who can't see it are telling you you're crazy. It's time for action, not just seeing it, but going to the next level, which is doing something about it. And in the end, the number of people in full knowledge of what's going on in terms of being behind this is a fraction of the 7 billion plus people, and they can only keep that number of people under control with two main ways, and many others on top of it. One is to keep them in ignorance of what's happening. That's the perception deception. And the other one is to set the target population at war with each other.
Mind control. That's
what they're doing. I mean, religions, races, income brackets, cultures, they're all played off against each other. And it's again, when you look at the state of being of this AI, archontic intelligence, it wants to control everything. It wants to control everything. Now you look at different cultures, corporations, governments, all these expressions of what we call human society. They all want to control everything.
Control freaks.
People are not, obviously more conscious people are, but those that are, fully blown controlled by this perception, they're not satisfied with living their lives as they see fit, in living their lives in the sense of, this is how I want to live my life, this is what I believe. They've got to impose it on other people. They've got to take over. They've got to do a holy war or invade a country or whatever, because they must have control. Or America, oh yeah, our values, oh yeah, killing people on a vast scale, yeah, good values, yeah. So it's all about, we must have control, we must take over, our will must be done. And you can see the common themes, and I look at the world, and it appears on the surface to be so diverse, but it ain't. It's just different expressions of the same basic perceptual state. You look at all the religions, they're all the frickin' same. You have a congregation, you have a deity, and you have somebody, usually a man, usually in a frock, between the congregation and the deity, telling the congregation what the deity wants them to do. Look at the religions. Yeah. They're all the same. It's a program. And
suppressing program.
The world is a program. But we don't have to concede to it. We don't. The program is a frequency range. That's all it is. And they want to get us into mental, emotional, and perceptual states that pull our point of attention, our point of perception, into that frequency band. If you can reevaluate your self-identity, stop seeing yourself as your name and your race and your religion and your life story, and start seeing yourself as awareness, a state of being aware, having experiences with those labels. So the labels are your experience, they're not who you are. That very reevaluation of self-identity will move you into another point of perception. It will move you, therefore, into another point of frequency. And that's why they get the target population unknowingly, in terms of what they're actually doing, policing anyone in the target population who is starting to move through that process, and therefore see and say things differently to everyone else. And fortunately, I have, some people would call it stubbornness. Other people would give it different names. But I've never had that. I won't have that. I won't have it. I will not have people tell me what I should think and what I should say. And they can throw all the abuse at me they like, but I'm still going to say it. And the more abuse you throw, the louder I'm going to say it. And what I hope I and others have shown is that you stand by what you believe and what you know, and you don't, you won't be silenced no matter what is thrown at you. Then eventually the waters start to part, and the world starts coming to you instead of you constantly having to go to the world to conform with what the world tells you should be. This is the great time where humanity needs to celebrate its uniqueness. You know, people think, oh, we're all one consciousness, oh, we're all the same. No! What is this infinite awareness? It's all possibility. It's all potential. It's all that is, has been, and ever can be. Therefore, to celebrate uniqueness is to celebrate the awareness that we are. It's when you start to cease to self-identify with being this awareness, eternal awareness, that you start to solidify into uniformity, which is what's happened in this world. When we start to self-identify with expanded awareness, then we start to not just see and express, but to celebrate the fact that we are, yes, a point of attention within the same awareness as everything else, but we're a unique point of attention with a unique perspective, a unique expression of all potential, all possibility. And so this is the time to celebrate diversity, not just in yourself, but celebrate diversity in others. And then we can start to move this solidification of perception where to be the same is to be celebrated instead of being different. Completely different way of looking at the world.
A very thrilling aspect of the reptile theme is the shape-shifting. I have heard from Stuart Swerdloff they need exactly a split 50% human genes, 50% reptilian genes to be able to shapeshift. What do you know about that?
Well, I mean, I know Stuart. Yes, Stuart says that from his knowledge inside of mind control projects like at Montauk in New York. For me, I say these hybrids are dual energetic fields. See, just different way of looking at it. I see what we call physical as holographic, illusory physical. So basically, the holographic illusory physical is a projection. So I focus on what the projection is coming from. And these are energetic fields, energetic information fields with different codes. And the dominant code is the one that people perceive and therefore decode. So that's the one they see. So when the dominant field is the human field, the human part of the hybrid, then anyone observing that person will see a human. But if the other field becomes the dominant one, which it does when they're out of human sight among themselves, then the observer will then decode that field, and to the observer, someone will have moved physically, solidly from one form to another. But the only place that's gone on is in the decoding processes of the observer, because this is all an illusion. I mean, all this stuff we think is outside of us, not outside of us at all. So it's a shift of an information field, it's kind of worth people remembering before they wave away something like reptilian entities manipulating human society. That the room they're looking at only exists in that form, in a few cubic centimeters at the back of the brain, which decodes visual reality. The night sky, which seems just extraordinary distances away, and billions of miles away, and all these fantastic light year distances, but in the form you're seeing it only exists in the same few centimeters at the back of the brain that decodes visual reality. I can do that, and yet that table is not solid. Now, when you look at that, a non-human race manipulating human society is real small deal when it comes to fantastic. I mean, what's more fantastic than that? When it's actually not only is it not solid, it's not actually there, outside of me. Now, I mean, compared with that, these other things are kind of low range fantastic, aren't they? Really, when you think about it.
Cool.
Time to go.
That's an hour and 5 minutes. That's a nice way to end as well.
Okay. Final question: have you seen a shapeshift yourself?
No, I've seen people's eyes change though. I've seen the reptilian eye go, over the years, because I've been, doing this for a long time. I've never seen someone shift full body. I met a number of people who have. I met loads of people who have. And I remember a story, kind of good one to finish on, really. I was invited to a conference in Santa Clara in California. It was a multi-speaker conference. Years ago, I used to do them. And I've turned up, and I've slept overnight, and not slept too well, a bit jet-lagged. And so I've come down during the day while the morning talks are going on. And the place is empty, everyone's inside the hall. And I'm walking around to get my bearings where everything is. And I walk into this room. It's a big room, and there's loads of tables with people's books on them. And it was empty apart from one guy. And he said, "Oh, hello, how are you?" Yeah. So I went across, we had a chat. And he was coming from what you might call a Christian patriot background. I mean, he was looking at it from a Christian point of view. He was looking at it from an American, almost a kind of John Wayne point of view, And he said to me, "I like your stuff." He says, "I think you say some good stuff." He said, "But I can't get my head behind this reptilian stuff and all this shape-shifting. I can't get my head around that." I said, "Well, as I said to everyone else, take what feels right, leave the rest. That's fair enough, no problem." Right. 24 hours later, he comes looking for me. He said, "I know what you mean." He said, "I've experienced it." I said, "What do you mean?" And he told me the story. There was a speaker at this conference who had been writing a column for this Christian Patriot guy's newspaper. And the guy had written an editorial. I mean, the guy running the newspaper, the guy I spoke to, he'd written an editorial about the previous month in which he'd been very critical of Israel, right, and what it was doing. And the writer was very pro-Israel, right, the speaker. So they've met, and I know what he meant, because in this hotel, it's still there, you had a big reception, then you had a gap in front of the reception, then you're all the bar area, it's very open. He said, "I'm sitting there in the bar having a drink," he said, "and this speaker came over, he'd just arrived, and was absolutely furious, spitting blood, angry. And a big loud argument ensued in the bar. until the hotel manager came over and said, look, would you please leave because you're upsetting the other guests. So this guy said to me, I said, I got up. He said, I just want to get away from him. Because he was in my face. I know the guy. It's exactly what he does. Anyway, he says, I walked towards the elevator. He said, I walked in the elevator, turned around, pressed the floor. And he said, the doors were just closing. And this guy put his arm through the door, and they opened. And he was in again. He said he was right in my face. And like I say, I know this guy, and I know that's exactly what he does. And he was, again, spitting blood, fury. And what people over the years have told me is that they've seen people shift when they've been in extreme states of anger. Because, you think about it, when people are furious, it sends an electrical charge through the energetic field, and it can destabilize it. That's why this can happen when people are in this state of absolute fury. He said, and he's there, he said, and he shifted. His eyes became reptilian. The guy's been... or the guys had a completely different view of the kind of stuff that I'm saying and others are saying ever since, because he's actually seen it. That's really what you have to do to be completely convinced, I guess. You have to see it. But there's another way, and that is to come across so many people all over the world telling you stories with the same theme, describing the same things in detail, to the point where something's going on here. And they just happen to be the same things that the ancients were describing, and the things that insiders are saying happen. So, how much evidence do people need before they think, this world isn't like I thought it was?
Thank you very much, David Icke.
No problem.
It was a huge privilege to
No,
listen to you.
great. No problem.